Welcome to Meadowlarkers 36, Joy in Revenge. Kate Fagan is here, Amin El-Hassan is here, and after not being around for a spell, I'm Howard Bryant, and I'm here too, a full quorum of your favorite team. This week's episode is called Joy in Revenge, as we discuss a particular strain of reaction to what should have been, to their fan bases at least, universally joyous occasions. After not making the playoffs last year, after failing to qualify for the bubble the previous year, after seeing their superstar sharpshooter Klay Thompson sidelined for 2 seasons by career-threatening injuries, the Golden State Warriors reached their 6th NBA final since 2015 and won their 4th title in those 8 seasons. They were back. They were champs again. In Game 4 at the Boston Garden, Steph Curry put on a show that won't long be forgotten. But what was a prominent part of the post-championship reaction, both from some Warriors fans and from the punditry that covers the sport? It was Kevin Durant. Revenge that KD left to win a title in Brooklyn, and the Nets haven't even reached the finals. Revenge that, see, the Warriors were champions with or without you, KD. In Boston, the team the Warriors defeated for the title, the response was somewhat similar. The Celtics hadn't reached the final since 2010. Their future is bright. They've got Tatum. They've got Brown. They'll be a favorite to repeat as Eastern Conference champions in 2023 and to win the NBA title. But what was a prominent part of Boston's championship run? Kyrie Irving. Bet you regret leaving Boston now, Kyrie. Take that, you flat earther. How do we explain this nasty edge in sports where victory must not only contain hoisting the trophy, but rubbing everyone's face in it? Is it simply a byproduct of our dialogue, fueled by the daily ritual of trash talk and dunking on each other on social media? Are we just devoid of joy and class? Have we become clapback nation? Or is it something even more pronounced? Is it a manifestation of anger, of fans giving these too-rich-to-care players their comeuppance for disappointing them, a way of putting them in their place? Is it an expression of disdain for the players and the sport, even though fans can't take their eyes off of it? And that the leagues themselves, in their quest for 24/7 dominance, encourage these soap opera elements to increase interest in the trades, the free agency, the dramas, to turn what was once a damaging negative, players routinely changing teams, into a net positive, really juicy storylines. Is this what we are now? The people who celebrate victory with a snarl instead of a smile? Let's talk about it. So, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Kate, Amin, it's been a while since we've had our group.
Here we are.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I miss y'all. Miss the 3 of us together, a certain vibe.
Speaking of vibe, I feel like you guys are going football, but I'm going tennis, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, Amin and I coordinated,
I didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
So tell me, what about this, right? Is this just simply just the nature of trash talk of where we are? I was fascinated by how much venom was out there after the Warriors win this championship. It is a terrific championship. It is a great, great story. And I was like, why is everybody focusing on Kevin Durant? I mean, is it simply the fact that it's part of this story, the Durant Warriors story? I mean, what were your first thoughts as the basketball guy?
Yeah, to me, I think people are invested in comeuppance. People love comeuppance, right? They love the ability to point to someone's decision after the fact and say, ha, you got it wrong. There's a very popular Twitter account called Freezing Cold Takes, at Old Takes Exposed. And it's the guy who runs it is fairly, lighthearted. It's not a big deal. But they'll do these things where they'll pull up when someone said something, and
I don't see the Warriors winning this game.
Yeah, one of those things, or I don't see the Warriors making the playoffs, right? Which, by the way, I was at the Warriors post championship celebration, and there had been brought up more than a couple of times by people pointing out that some prognosticators had them out of the playoff picture going into this year. And even before the finals, 538 had their odds, and it was always like 82% chance the Celtics going to win this, 78% chance. Even after they lost Game 5, the Celtics were still favored something like 70 some odd percent to win the finals. So there is an innate human nature to love the comeuppance, right? To love to point out when somebody got it wrong. But in this case, it's not someone saying the Warriors are going to win or lose. In this case, it was Kevin Durant, who I think has the unenviable position of being vilified for being in a position of privilege to play with the Warriors. And then when he leaves, he's now being vilified for leaving this privilege behind him.
Amin, have you been featured on Frozen Cold Takes?
Everyone has. Yeah, freezing cold takes. Everyone has.
But I also feel
there's no shortage.
I mean, I have not been featured mostly because I try not to offer very many takes. I guess if you offer enough takes, one of them will be featured on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere you will be freezing cold.
Okay.
Yep.
So this idea of comeuppance, I mean, I think what I find compelling about our current sports world is that the opportunity to point to and focus on a comeuppance is myriad compared to what it used to be, or what it feels like it used to be. It used to be you might have like 3 main storylines running across the NBA, and now at every turn, even in an everyday NBA game, you can point to some form of comeuppance or a revenge, or someone was wronged or someone was traded. It's just like we are caught in the minutia that the comeuppance can happen at every turn. And I think in thinking about this, it feels like in some ways, this is just a product of fractured audience that we talk about all of the time, that audiences are fractured now. So since we have a fractured audience, we have to radicalize the audience that we do have. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have, if your audience is fractured and it's small, well, then they better be buying every piece of gear you put out and be watching every game and be invested in dozens of storylines to pull them through an 82 game regular season. So it feels like this is all a trickle down. In some ways, it's like a trickle down effect of, okay, we have no more casual. We have so few casual fans now. We have to radicalize everybody.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great way of putting it. Radicalization of the fan base to make up for, again, the dying of the casual, right? The dying of the person who turns on the TV and says, what's on tonight? The NBA Finals. Oh, yeah, I'll give it a look, right? But at the same time, I wonder if within that radicalization also is an appeal to the casual fan, right? Well, how do I make sense of what this championship means? What's the fourth? Or is it easier to say, hey, you know that guy, Kevin Durant, who's this great player, you may have heard of him? Yeah, he actually used to play for them, and the dummy left. He left. He went somewhere else. And that in and of itself is a much easier to digest storyline, I think, for someone who hasn't been fully invested in the NBA, in the NBA season.
Yeah.
Isn't it just also, I'm sorry, Kate, also, is it a mean-spiritedness that comes with it?
Yeah.
It's I told you so is not never comes from a good place. Like, because it doesn't, like, if you think about that statement, it doesn't do anything for anybody.
No. Your two options in that moment are to say nothing and move forward and rise above, or to just have to sit there and point backward. But Howard, one additional thing I was going to say about in what we get lost in the sports world right now, it also just feels so like ephemeral, because you can name dozens of storylines just from the NBA playoffs or just from one particular series. But when this becomes history, when we're finally looking back on this 20, 30 years from now, our brains, whatever file this is put into in our brains, we're not going to have room for that much data. No, we're not going to have, we're just going to remember, oh yeah, the Warriors won. Yeah, that was the one that they won. And maybe we'll be able to say that was the one Steph carried them to. We might have the bandwidth for that, but like all of this is just going to be like lost to history. We're living in it right now, but these are not the storylines that will survive.
Yeah, and isn't it also to the volume of opinions? That's what social media has also done, that everybody has something to say. And because everyone has something to say, that something to say has to be scrutinized as to whether or not you were right. And also in media, even when you're working for newspapers, like it was one of the reasons why I absolutely hated doing the predictions. World Series prediction, who's going to win? When I was doing sports reporters back, the late great sports reporters on ESPN, when I felt like the show was sort of drifting in the wrong direction, it was when we had so many questions that Jamel and I used to refer to as "how the fuck should I know" questions. Right? All you're going to do is get set up. Lakers, Suns, Howard, who's going to win? How the fuck should I know who's going to win? Right? I mean, and so, but this is big. You're exposing yourself to this type of communication, because now, when you say the Suns are going to win and the Lakers win by 12, now everyone is emailing you saying, see, and it's like, I don't really take it that seriously, but it is now a piece of the conversation in terms of how we communicate with these storylines. And I think part of the reason is we've also embedded this soap opera into the game. This off season, who's going to go where, who likes who. And so this becomes part of the storyline when it comes to the final score, because we were thinking about all the off season moves when this person decided to stay or opt in or opt out or whatever.
Yeah. This idea that the business of, in this case, we're talking about basketball. But I think obviously this is every major sport doing this, that the machinations and the business of the sport are incredibly interesting to people. And I think for a lot of people they are. And it is now a necessity to have your inner workings be part of the overall functioning of what your sport is. And so it's like, let's see if I can make this connect. But anyone who's watched one of the Tinker Hatfield, the legendary Nike designers, the story of his career at Nike, there's this little vignette about how he went traveling, and I think it was in Germany, it was somewhere in Europe. It was the first time he'd seen a building that its walls were glass and you could see the inner workings of the building. You could see the pipes and you could see all of the ducts and the vents, and it was his inspiration for the Nike Air Max, where you could actually look at the bottom heel,
the bubble.
And you could kind of see into the shoe. And I feel like we love that in sports. We love this idea that things that used to be obscured from the view of a fan, we now have websites dedicated to the salary and all the things. I mean, I know you could talk about the
decision making that goes into it all.
But at some point, it's like, when does that jump the shark? Because it's like, I don't want to go into a restaurant and they're like, look, we had so much trouble with our shifts today. We could barely get a third cook, and we're short on it. It's like, at some point, it's like, I don't want to know the inner workings of a business. But in sports, it's like, the more we know about almost everything, seemingly the better. But then are we getting mired in the minutia of this stuff and losing sight of the joy and the fun of it?
Well, that's how I felt after the Celtics beat Brooklyn in the first round. And the fans were just wanting to rip Kyrie Irving apart. See, this is on you, right? This is what you did. This is because you left, and now don't you regret leaving? And all of the back and forth between the fan base and the players. And yet when the game is over, the players are hugging each other. And so you've got this juxtaposition. Go ahead.
Howard, I would say that's different, right? Because at least in that case, it was outright Boston versus Brooklyn.
And it was Boston versus Kyrie.
Well, I mean, on paper, it was Boston versus Brooklyn, and Kyrie obviously having left Boston, some would say spurned Boston, right, in favor of Brooklyn. There's a very direct one-to-one reaction there that I think that exists throughout time. The part where Golden State wins and everyone's running over to Kevin Durant. That's the weird one because it's not like he lost.
And they'd already won
the
2
Warriors.
titles.
Right. He had nothing to do with this. He had zero impact on this. But the idea that people continue to make that association between them and him, that's the part that's kind of odd, I think, in this situation. And Kate, we talked about this, I think on Meadowlarkers before. I know we talked about it on LeBatard Show, the concept of reporting in sports has become so transaction focused, right? The journalism in sports is so focused on who went where and who got traded where and who signed where. And it kind of detracts from the actual storytelling of what happened in these games, what happened in this championship. And so I think there is some burden to bear from the media as far as why people are like that in terms of so focused on the transaction side. But again, I feel like the other part of this is an innate human nature thing of I want to say, I told you so, you got it wrong, ha
People
ha.
like rubbing it in other people's faces is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that there is so few opportunities when someone has doubted you publicly and then you prove them wrong that you almost feel like you have to take those opportunities. Like I feel like I should have risen above when we were at Colorado, when we were in the NCAA tournament, our local, I mean, it's like our Denver Post or like Boulder Camera. North Carolina was coming in town and we were hosting, we were going to play them to go to the Sweet 16. And the columnist, of course, he's just filling inches. He's like, look, there's no way the Buffaloes beat the Tar Heels because Tar Heels are way quicker, way faster. Colorado's just not going to be able to keep up with them. And we won and we went to the Sweet 16. And like on the way out of the arena, that reporter is like by us walking out. And I'm like, great column, huh? Like, guess you were told. Like, there's no reason for me to say that.
Kate Fagan went us against the world.
Yeah, there's no reason for me to say that other than like, how often do you get the opportunity? Someone's doubted you in print. Then you prove them wrong. Right. Then you can actually have, like, you see them.
Now I get to dunk on you.
Pre-Twitter, whatever. It's like, you can't avoid just like, you're like, I got to do it. I got to.
One of my most famous, cold takes exposed is 2016 when the Warriors up 3-1. I went on this really, what I like to think of, a very sharp, tight rant about how this series is over. Like, the Warriors are just better in every single way, and LeBron looks like he's done. He's washed, and he's on the downside of his career. I mean, it is so eloquent and so well-paced and so wrong on every level, right? Of course, at the time, this is after Game 4. I'm like, this thing's over. Even if they lose Game 5, they'll wrap it up in 6. Well, they lose Game 7, and the first thing is I see David Griffin, who I saw after Game 4. David Griffin, who at the time was the general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers. After Game 4, run into him. I worked for him in Phoenix, so this is my guy. And I say, hey, Griff, tough one, but, like, this is a team from history. What do you expect? It's okay. You guys did your best. You gave it a fighting chance. And, like, next year you'll be back and we'll see how it goes, right? And Griff says to me, our guys are upset right now because they feel like they should be up 3-1 in the series. And I laughed in his face. I said, well, good luck with that one, buddy. Pat him on his back, and I went about my way. Fast forward.
What is wrong with you?
Well, I mean, look, these are my friends. I'm not going to bullshit them, right? So, Game 7, I'm walking from the floor, down the tunnel over to media seating in the back. I guess to catch a press conference or whatever. And I see a champagne-soaked David Griffin. And he looks at me and he says, hey, Amin, fuck you. I said, you know what? Fair enough, right? But then, so we're done with everything. At the end of the night, I'm leaving the arena. And outside, I come out the tunnel, the loading dock. Outside, there are fans, like waiting, I guess, to catch a glimpse of the team leaving or whatever. And there's this guy in a Cavs jersey who is literally weeping. I mean, you said we were going to win. I said, okay, and you won? And?
Congrats.
I'm going to media hospitality to get drunk. What are you going to do? You're going to sit here and cry outside the arena all night long? What is it? I don't know, but I know this is something that's as old as basically written word or even spoken word, that people have an intense desire to say, "Ha, told you so."
Well, that's one of my favorite things. When we went in, I don't remember what year it was. I think it was '01. '01, which was the 9/11 year, and it was a very quiet celebration when the Yankees won the pennant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, goodness. I mean, they beat the Mariners, who had won 116 games.
Yep.
Okay. However, anybody covering that team, and I mean all of us, nobody was afraid of the 2001 Mariners. They won 116 games. The Yankees were convinced they were going to go in there and beat them, and they did. It wasn't even much of a series. Nobody on the Yankees was really that concerned about the Mariners, despite their record. They had played them straight up during the regular season. They had beaten them in the playoffs the year before, even though they didn't have Ichiro the year before. But it wasn't a thing, right? They were the Yankees. They had won, 3 straight pennants. They were going for their 4th straight World Series. So we walk into the clubhouse, and there's one of the, I don't remember who it was, but it was a fringe guy who was like, "Oh, yeah, it's the media. Nobody gave us a chance." What are you talking about? You're the New York Yankees. You've won the last 3 straight World Series. Nobody gave you a chance.
Yeah.
Everybody expects you to win all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, the Yankees should forfeit their right to say that in perpetuity. Come on. Yeah.
Nobody thought we could win. You're the New York Yankees.
Yeah.
And so, but this is part of that human nature thing. But there's another piece of this too that I was thinking about as well as we were thinking about this topic, which is how much of what we're talking about is also this sort of love-hate relationship that the public has with sports. That there is sort of that some of it is just the basic trash talk, right? You said we were going to lose and we won, right? And then some of it is also maybe a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of like, you guys have already won at life because Kyrie Irving, win, lose, or draw, is opting into a $36.9 million deal. And I'm making this connection to the beginning of the restart during the pandemic, where the incidences of fan-player interaction were getting more and more heated. And so I'm starting to wonder if is there something about this that is a little edgy, but at the end of the day is all in good fun? Or do you feel like there is a loss of enjoyment here, that the way people are interacting with this game isn't as joyous? Because when your team wins a championship, you're supposed to be happy. Everybody's supposed to be happy. And that includes the players. When you walk into the clubhouse and they're like, "Yeah, nobody thought we could win, motherfuckers. Take great." I mean, it's like, wait a minute. You guys have the hardware right there. This is what you're emphasizing?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way I think about this is that I agree with you, Howard, that it feels like there's less sort of just joy is the easiest way to put it, or charitability with players. And I think some of it is the money, and some of it is in my mind, a byproduct of how over the last 5 to 10 years, we've made all of our play work. Like, there's nothing that we don't really get into the weeds about. You can, I've read articles about how even during the pandemic, people who loved Friends, say the TV show Friends, and they're like, we should do a podcast about it. And then they're going back and they're cataloging every episode of Friends. And then like 3 months into it, they have turned what they loved into this little side hustle. And you can go down the line and see how even every little thing that used to be like a habit. Wow. Every little thing that used to be like a habit or fun,
including the Hobbit.
Yeah, including the Hobbit. Everything that used to be a habit or fun, you can see somebody come in and it's like there's metrics, there's algorithms. We are turning all of that into work. And I think sports is definitely one of the places
100%, it's a great point,
where we have turned our play into work. Like most NBA fans, like they've got all of these tabs pulled up about things that usually only people who are employed by the team would be caring about,
including the salary cap spreadsheets about our money going. So like, wait a minute, it's not your money.
So it's like it doesn't seem like anymore. It's like, oh, like I live in New York and I love my city, and and I love the Mets, and like we won a championship. It's like it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So our producer Chris Whittingham on the show this week was talking about him learning that if the Heat were to try to trade for Kevin Durant, they would not be able to send back Idris Adebayo because of this very nuanced rule in the collective bargaining agreement that says if you have one player who's been extended under the designated player extension rule, which is what Ben Simmons got, then you cannot trade for another one. You can't trade for two of them. You can have two on your roster, but only one may be acquired by trade. The other must be a homegrown one. And he got so upset. He's like, why are the rules so effing difficult? Why can't I just understand why my favorite team can't get my favorite player on it? And I said, well, the rules are that way because they did it to protect owners from other more wealthy owners. But the reality is we've made it so that I don't know if you can be just a fan in the NBA. Say, oh, my favorite team.
Been radicalized. Team. Yeah.
Yes. In order to follow the sport and be a fan of this sport, you're forced to have to learn these things, right? Because otherwise, you can't understand. What do you mean the Lakers can't just sign Kyrie Irving if he's a free agent and give him the max? Why not? Like, the salary cap forces people to have to learn things, which, by the way, this doesn't exist in Europe, right? Like, this level of fandom where people are, I think, really obsessed with the intricacies of the economics of what's happening, right? They just care that their favorite team got their favorite player. They might know how much he's getting paid. They might know how much they paid his former club in order to acquire him. But they don't really care about like anything beyond that. Well, Barcelona sells more merchandise than any other. Like, they don't care about that stuff.
Yeah, and they don't care. But that's also part of what has taken place over the course of the last 30 years, or actually the last 20 years, where I would say we really have turned the fan into the junior GM. Mm-hmm. And that has been something, and I think what that does is it creates a level of competition, a competitiveness that you're actually having with the player, because now you're acting as though you're the one doing the trading and you're the one doing the acquiring when you're still just watching from home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another competition at play. Sorry, Kate.
No, go for it.
There's competition with other fans to prove I'm the knowledgeable one. You guys just watch it. I know what the inside people know, right? I always used to say this on the jump at ESPN. Like, our job is to make our viewers feel like the smart one of their social group, right? So that when somebody asks, wait a second, why can't Kyrie sign for more than $6 million if he goes to the Lakers? You're the one who said, actually, I have the answer to that question, right? Every fan fancies themselves as that guy. Like, I'm the one who I explain to everybody else. This is how it's very complicated. You don't understand this, but I understand it because, look, if I had an opportunity, I'd kill it at this job. I'd be great at this job, but here I am, right? And so that's the other element. It's not just competing with the players in terms of like, hey, I'm the junior GM. I like the idea of that term. It's also a level of I'm competing with everybody else to be the smart one in my group.
Mm-hmm. And the trickle-down effect seems, and something we kind of dance around or have talked about a lot, is the idea that there are some championships that are worth more than other championships. Yeah. Or like there's clean championships and dirty championships. Yeah. And obviously steroids is the thing we used to point to when we talk about something like that. But now it's like this Warriors championship is a clean championship for Steph. Yes. It is not
ill-begotten.
Yes, it is not marred by KD. And so it's like because we have all of this nuance and because we have all of the understanding of the salary cap and the machinations and trades and all of that, now we can say now championships are not 1-to-1. Okay, every championship is equal. It's like, no, that was a real championship. LeBron's in Cleveland is a real championship. And now we have like tiers of championships as well. This thing that you would think would be, okay, it's on a pedestal. Like we are not we are not categorizing it or breaking it down. Now it feels like, okay, so the ones that Steph won with KD are kind of like one quality of championship. And then the kind you win, you know, we all know that you kind of learn through osmosis the rules of this. Like, okay, if you've drafted these players mostly, maybe you signed one in free agency, but he stayed with you for a while. Like, these are the rules in order to acquire like a clean championship. I'm not sure that will stand the test of time, though. I don't think 50 years from now people will be like, Steph had, 7 championships, but like 3 of them were I don't know that will stand the test.
And on top of that, this was happening during the finals. Well, Steph's never been the MVP of one of these championships. Who cares? Right? But once again, this is also the specter of Michael. Well, Michael was the MVP of all 6 of his, which makes him the better player or the best player of all time. And so there's that, but isn't there also, Kate, what comes to this, and I mean also which comes to this too, this is what happens when you've decided that your off season has become a transaction-based soap opera. That not only are players moving and changing teams, but the reportage is going to be, here's why they're changing teams. And this whole super team, notion where everyone is sort of on the phone conspiring, and how many times when a guy gets acquired or when a player gets acquired, then there's this long backstory about the recruiting dinner at the Capitol Grill with, Kevin Garnett and Pierce and Ray Allen. And so now it's become a reality show in a lot of ways. And so because this is how it works, by the time you get to the end of the season, which is now you've crowned a champion, now we're essentially having a referendum on those dinners. See, you shouldn't have taken that dinner. You shouldn't have signed with that team. And it becomes its own soap opera. And where it actually really does come from is baseball in a lot of ways. All of this stems back to baseball in that there was one sport that owned its off season. Every other sport, you didn't even care about the off season. You just waited for them to show up for training camp or whatever, and then they went on with their year. But baseball had the winter meetings.
The winter meetings. Yeah.
And the winter meetings is the hot stove league, and they still call it the hot stove league. Now, baseball has ceded that ground for several reasons, but in baseball, everybody went down to Hawaii or San Diego or wherever the winter meetings were that year, and they were all compelled to make deals. It was essentially its own reality show in the off season. Who won the off season? Now, baseball has gotten rid of that. In the old days, you had to make a deal by Christmas, and if you didn't make a deal by Christmas, then guys couldn't sign with their own team until like May 1st or whatever. So you were compelled to actually act. Those rules have changed, but in lieu of that, now basketball has its free agent soap opera. Not starting with the decision, but absolutely exacerbated by the decision. Football, they have TV shows now based on when free agency starts at 12:01. Here we go. And so you've got the reporting, to your point, all about that as well. So this entire industry has turned the offseason out of the need to have a 24/7, 12-month calendar. It's turned this stuff into news. And now when we get to the end of the season, now we get to see if you made the right decision, if you should have taken door number 2 and you walked through door number 1, etc., with also the finger pointing that comes with that. See, you shouldn't have left.
I wonder if you might not have your pulse on this, but the player, like NBA players, they obviously like the TV revenue that comes with this perpetual intrigue. But is there any discussion at this point, off of what Howard's saying and the way this has evolved? Is there any discussion about about at times feeling like this is overkill? I mean, I'm on Instagram and this is not exactly this, but it's like they're at Fashion Week and I'm seeing pictures of like all kinds of NBA players at Fashion Week, and like I know this is part of social media, but the question I'm wondering is could this become a collective bargaining topic to say things have to be shut down for longer during the off season, just to provide us some sense of like an actual life when it comes to how the league tries to perpetuate like an incessant
is it diminishing
off-season.
returns?
Yeah.
in the sense of what? In the sense of the coverage, or
like in sense, like you look at, I don't know what the NCAA rules are now about, you know, you can't, there's no contact. I don't know what they are now. Mine are 15 years old, but like you cannot talk to anybody for.
Right.
I mean, obviously people are going to talk to whoever they want to talk to, but if there's a longer stretch of we're not doing transactions for a long stretch to try to, I mean, they might not even want this, but aren't the players a little frustrated by this?
No, the union is the opposite. Union doesn't want to. Yeah, they don't want the transaction period to be limited because then that presents their players with take it or leave it opportunities. Look, this is all we're gonna pay. You gonna take it or you're not gonna be signed. They don't want that. They want the conversation to be ongoing and for any player to have the opportunity to sign whenever he's ready to, or whenever he finds the deal that is most palatable. Now, there's a soft deadline, so to speak, in the sense that once camp opens, now you're more compelled to, like, I got to be somewhere. I don't want to be left out for camp. I don't want to be behind the 8 ball. And then obviously as the season starts or whatever, there's a level of, well, all the money is spent. So I'm taking a less favorable deal. But the reality is, it behooves them from a negotiation standpoint to have as long a period as possible with this. And then the other part is, man, they like the attention. They like seeing their name. They don't like seeing their names when it's bandied about in trade discussion, if there's somewhere they like. But they do like the attention, I feel like. You know, the idea that, hey, what Kyrie just did over the last 4 or 5 days is proof of that. This is someone who, hey, we got all these 6 teams that are interested and we got permission to sign in trades and all that. And then at the end of it, he opts in. Well, what was that all about? Well, it was just about
people like to be wooed.
Yes.
Well, but doesn't that go to the point of we are going to make a business model out of the off season as well? It's like spring training in baseball, where spring training was never a piece of the revenue. Now it's a revenue generating element of the game. You can't go to spring training without dropping $100 now if you want to go buy 3 tickets, where it used to be $5. Yep. And so basketball and football, but especially basketball, really does seem to have won this period. Like, I remember what year it was. I think it was the year LeBron came back to
2014.
Yeah, I think
when he didn't make his decision for a while, and everything was like on hold. Yeah,
everything was on hold. I was in spring training the following year, and there were a couple of GMs who were just enraged. They were enraged at ESPN. They were enraged at me. I was like, I don't make these decisions, but they were talking about, because baseball, generally speaking, it's the only live, active sport in town during that time period, and they couldn't get on ESPN for one of the GMs was telling me that at the owners' meeting, they had timed when baseball got on SportsCenter.
Right.
As the only live sport going, it averaged something like 12 minutes. It was like 2 commercial breaks in before baseball was mentioned. And I was like, go ahead. And the reason was they were all talking basketball. They were all talking, where's LeBron going to go? They were all talking about all of these different, to Kate's point about whether or not it's overkill. No, they love this piece. Because once again, I guess to Kate's point is, at some point, does this become law of diminishing returns? But as of today, they love this idea that even when they're not playing, they're the story.
So that 2014, that was the first year I was on SportsCenter. I did the draft, but my first SportsCenter hit was the day before the draft or the day of the draft. I was doing SportsCenter, and then a couple of days after that, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come back in a week for free agency?" I said, "Sure." I came back the following week. And the idea was I was just going to be there for those 3 or 4 days, and that was it. But LeBron didn't make his decision, and so it just kept getting delayed. So they're like, come back another 3 or 4 days. Okay. And because LeBron hadn't made a decision yet, there was this weird thing. I've never seen it since, and I can't remember seeing it before, but everyone was kind of in a holding pattern. Well, we got to see what LeBron's going to do. because depending on where he goes, if he stays in Miami, if he goes back to Cleveland, then this guy's going to go here, this guy's going to go there. I think Gordon Hayward was supposed to go to Cleveland, and the Cavs are supposed to start building this kind of young upstart team, and all of a sudden LeBron's coming. Now it's like, okay, well, can we get Kevin Love, and all of these things, all these dominoes collapse afterward. The idea though that the baseball GMs would be upset because all the coverage was devoted to this thing is the high point or the most positive version from the NBA side of like, yo, our transaction season was so popping, we literally distracted people away from other live sports.
Mm-hmm.
8 years later, Howard, I will submit to you that the comeuppance that's happened to the league is the all-consuming fire. It used to be, yay, our transactions are so great, it overshadows other sports live game action. And now we're at a place, I don't know if the league knows it or not, where, oh my God, our transaction season is so overwhelming, it overshadows our own live sports action. People are so consumed with the transaction, they don't care about the games themselves. And the ratings show that.
And what's wild about that, too, I'm sorry, Kate, hop on. What's wild about that, too, is this happens during the season. I mean, you're sitting there in December, and, there's, Jason Tatum, who can be a free agent at the end. It's like, it's December. Mm-hmm. And so you're 100% right. But this also does, at some level, feed into then the reaction by the public of... Kate, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Howard, this is probably segueing into something that you can chime in on, is like, there isn't even a sliver of room to actually discuss the basketball you've seen, because it is immediately usurped by discussion of who's going where, in the middle of what should be a time when you're actually hopefully watching and enjoying the game itself. Mm-hmm. The top level discussion is like, people, of course we're watching the game, but like your brain, just like everything is fried these days, your brain isn't even necessarily watching the Celtics versus the Warriors and fully present. You have been programmed to think, well, who's going to go where? What else could we do when they leave because of, so-and-so leaves because of this deal? Who else can we get? It's like your brain is firing on all these cylinders because you have been conditioned to think about the game this way.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think there are two pieces to that too. Number one is fantasy sports. We are the junior GMs. We're doing the exact same thing that they're doing. And so we're thinking about this in those terms. And then the other thing is also now gambling, when people are talking about, once more, the comeuppance piece of this, because now you're actually betting on these pieces.
Right.
And once you do that, I mean, and you see it in media now, you watch the game, and one of the things that people talk about is they've got the odds on the screen now. And so if you're a player sitting in your hotel room, you see that that Vegas is betting against you. And what does that do to a competitive athlete? And so it's not just the fans. It's also the fact that the guys are on the air, and Draymond Green is sitting there sparring with Kendrick Perkins. And then you look at the crawl line across, and it says that the Warriors have a 73% chance of losing the finals, even though they've won the last two games or whatever. And all of this begins to feed into the comeuppance, and to see, I got Vegas was wrong, you're wrong, and what used to sort of be the us against the world in the clubhouse once you won is completely sort of spread into everybody being able to dunk on one another.
There's another part to this that's beyond that, beyond fantasy, beyond gambling, beyond even the need for comeuppance. And I think this is something, again, that the league tapped into and now is out of control. And it's just the need for something to happen for the sake of something happening. I was trying, while you guys were talking, sensation. I was trying to think of, while you guys were talking, if this happened in the NFL, and I realize it doesn't, because that's why one of the reasons why the NFL has a very strong TV kind of direction there. The idea that, thinking about Giannis before he signed his extension, we spent an entire 2 years Giannis scored 35, grabbed 17 rebounds, and dished out 8 assists. Will he be doing it next year in a Heat jersey? Maybe he'll be a Raptor. Oh, I heard that the scout in Dallas is one of his best friends. Like, that's what we did to this guy all the way up until he signed his deal. We prevented ourselves from enjoying, and this is the coverage. We're not talking about fans. The coverage of it was where's he gonna go?
Yeah. And isn't this like the? Sorry, Howard. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that this is the other piece of that thing we've been talking about as well, player empowerment. The players have way more power in the NBA than any other sport. And they have that power because of the CBA, but they also have that power because of the nature of that sport. One person changes everything in basketball. And so it doesn't happen that way in the NFL necessarily because the teams have so much more control. They control your money, they control your movement. So in basketball, it really does lend itself to this sort of free-for-all type of thing because the players do have that kind of juice. Kate, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was going to say, like, I think there's a fundamental human issue here is that I don't know if you all do this, but I think some listeners will resonate with this. That, like, now that I have the technology that I could take 20 minutes and fake plan a vacation to, say, Croatia, right? I do this frequently. I'll be like, I'm going to price out tickets and I'm going to find a great hotel, even though I can't go to Croatia at the end of this month, but I've heard it's beautiful. I think that we have those technological tools now that allow me to just like live in the future, live in an alternate universe for a hot second. And I think we have the same tools available now to fans of a team. So it's like inevitable that if you're like, okay, I know Giannis, he might not be a buck. Let me just see. Yeah, let me just trade machine. Let me see what the taxes are, state taxes are. If you can't, I mean, we can like live in this version of a travel in the future that we are often always pulled to, right? Like anticipation often being better than reality.
I guess my thing is that, for instance, nobody watches the Ravens because part of it, I guess what I'm saying is part of it is the way the game is covered. When you watch the Baltimore Ravens, it's not a common speaking point within the broadcast, within the studio show or the play-by-play about Lamar Jackson. Where's he going to go when his deal is up? Is he going to see a Raven?
Unless the team is going to move him.
Unless there's a legitimate news story of breaking. Hey, the Ravens are looking to right. But in terms of just, I'm watching the game. That guy's going to be a free agent, huh? I wonder if he's going to be back or if he's going to be a Dolphin next year. That doesn't happen in football. In basketball, when you have a player who is a great player, who has an impending free agency happening, that will be the discussion for many games, broadcasts within the broadcast, and also studio shows. Whether it's the shows like, I guess, NBA Today or generalist shows like Get Up. They're going to talk about that when they talk about basketball. It's like, what's the best fit for Giannis? That was a topic I saw in show after show after show. I've never seen what's the best fit for Lamar Jackson. He's going to be a free agent in a year. We don't do that to football.
Yeah.
100%.
Wait, Howard, before we hop off here, considering that last week you defined for us Girl Friday, and so I want to give you the opportunity because earlier in the show you said something and I didn't know what it was. So of course I texted our producer. What is this hot stove season in baseball? Like, what's the idiom?
Why are you doing this to me?
Okay, I mean, I have it written here. I can read it. But when you said that, what does it mean?
Old. All right, the hot stove league is a term for baseball in the off season when there's no baseball.
Mm-hmm. Why? Where did it come from?
What is the etymology of the hot stove?
Yeah.
No, that's a good
question. I have it. I'm going to read it. Ready?
You got it? All right, let's hear it.
In the early days of baseball, hot stove season referred to an actual baseball season, hot stove leagues in which Major League Baseball players would stay in shape by playing baseball in their hometowns while staying warm with actual hot stoves. The term soon expanded to become a kind of predecessor to the water cooler. On a cold day, fans would gather around the hot stove to discuss their favorite teams. That's kind of fun.
Awesome.
It's kind of fun.
That is awesome. I never actually knew what the hot stove league meant. It's just that's the way we refer to the off season. It's the hot stove.
Yeah. What do we call the NBA then? There is no. It's just what?
It's fire, just a blaze,
Yes, nonstop.
torching everything in its path.
Including its own league.
Exactly. I mean, do you have final thoughts on this, or have you said all that you need to say?
I mean, yeah, it would probably just be a recap of what I said, but I think that is one of the biggest obstacles Adam Silver has in front of him in terms of making sure stabilizing the ratings for basketball, the ratings on the things that actually make them money. You have to get people away from speculation constantly and back focused on the product on the floor.
Kate Fagan?
No, I think the hot stove thing was really a high point for me.
That is your mic. Hot stove is your mic drop. For me, I'm going to say one of the reasons I love hockey so much is when the players score, they look really happy. And that's what they don't mean mug. They just look really happy because scoring a goal is really hard. And so is winning a championship. So to me, enjoy those titles, and there's no reason to do all the dunking on each other. It's a long season. Have fun with your titles, and we will see you all next week.